So yeah, that came about as part of the 50th anniversary. And basically, statistics have shown that currently less than 6% of licensees are female. And there's significantly fewer women than men involved in protected wreck teams. So the overarching aim of this project is to better understand the apparent low levels of female involvement in protected wrecks, and analyse reasons for this and the potential impact this has and is having on engagement with and understanding of protected wrecks. So these are some of the research questions that we're hoping to address through the project. So, why are the numbers of women holding licenses so low? What are the actual demographics of protected wreck teams? How does that gender demographic reflect the situation within professional maritime archaeology? What impact is this having? How do we also find and tell more women's stories in maritime archaeology? And ultimately, how do we encourage more women to be involved in protected wrecks? So the project's using a combination of desk-based research, a survey and direct interviews to gather baseline data to better understand how women are and how they have been involved with the investigation of protected wreck sites. So the 50th anniversary of the Act has provided a milestone really to consider women's involvement and also look to future actions to address it. So there's also many stories related to women and protected or scheduled ships and shipping histories that we wanted to explore as well. So starting with the desk-based research, this is still ongoing, but I wanted to show you some of the preliminary results. Thank you, Terry at Historic England, for providing information on the licensee teams. So this graph on the left is from 2011 to 2022. So you can see consistently less than 30% of the teams are female across that period. Now, this project focuses on women involved with protected wrecks, but we've felt that it's also important to gather wider statistics on women's involvement in shipwrecks and maritime archaeology, both professionally and avocationally. So it's also included a brief review of the gender balance of speakers at UK maritime archaeology focused conferences and events. So here are the figures from the IMAS Shipwreck Conference. Again, very few female speakers, many years. Even this year in 2023, there were no female speakers. I looked briefly at the programme for this weekend and including speakers, chairs and panellists, I think just about 30% are female for this conference. We've also looked at published website information on team members of staff in maritime archaeological organisations in England. And we've been provided with statistics for members, friends, committees and so on. So again, thank you to many of you who've shared this data with me. In terms of staff, we do see a real shift in the gender balance. We've got more women employed, and in terms of membership, then trustees, presidents and so on, they are more male dominated. And we've also got a graph here for university teaching staff from UK universities that teach maritime archaeology specifically. I will add a caveat that this is ongoing data collection. So some of the reviews of the published website information was undertaken back in January this year. So I will be checking for up-to-date information as well. Interestingly, BZAC have recently published statistics showing that 27% of their members are female. And they state as well that they think almost 4 times as many men take part in sports diving than women. I've actually popped a link to their webpage here because that does provide some advice on growing female membership and the benefits of having a diverse dive club. And I thought they had some interesting information about like what the barriers were and so on. We're also undertaking a review of women involved through a review of published sources, such as the UK-based IGNA articles from the last 50 years. So hopefully we'll have that information soon. And as mentioned, the contribution of avocationals is crucial when discussing maritime archaeology. So we've got the statistics obviously showing the protected wreck teams, but I do want to look more widely at volunteers in maritime archaeology and the gender balance. So I'm hoping to gather some more information on that soon and include that as part of the project. We're also conducting an online survey to understand in more detail women's involvement in protected wrecks and seek to gather information on attitudes to and experiences of involvement. So this aims to target any women working with protected wrecks, whether protected wreck team members, diving visits to protected wrecks, non-diving research and analysis, or working with recovered collections from protected wrecks, for example. But it also invites responses from any women with an interest in protected wrecks, diving or maritime archaeology in general to gauge wider interest and engagement. So you can scan this QR code or make a note of the links to undertake the survey. It takes about 10 minutes to complete. So, or just email me or message me if you want a link to the survey. So the survey is ongoing. We've so far received about 40 responses, I think. These have been from a variety of individuals, including maritime archaeologists, volunteers, those involved in publication and dissemination, those working in museums and sports divers. So one of the questions we ask is about the gender composition of protected wreck teams. The majority of answers said the groups were dominated by men, with around a third or less of the team being female divers. Here are answers to some of the questions, asking, why so few females involved, and more specifically, what barriers people have faced. So the survey's shown generally there is a balance in terms of gender in maritime archaeology professionally, but not in the sports diving community. This is starting to change. Historical gender roles, particularly relating to childcare, has meant many women in the past didn't have the free time perhaps to get involved as volunteers, but like I said, hopefully this is changing. We do need female role models. I think that whole see it to be it concept is really important. Some basics such as lack of toilet facilities on boats were raised by several people when discussing barriers. There was also positive answers from people saying they've never faced any barriers to involvement based on their gender. The survey has highlighted other barriers people face. Funding obviously comes up quite a lot, and lack of opportunities. We see those answers on there. So the survey closes at the end of this month. So yeah, in less than 2 weeks. So if anyone hasn't done it yet, head to the MAT website or, like I said, email me. Would love to hear from more people, really. And then we'll undertake a more in-depth analysis of the results in the next couple of months. As well as the survey, we've been undertaking interviews with women involved in protected wrecks. We've spoken to Veronica Robbins, the first national receiver of wreck, Jane Maddox, Alex Hildred, Barry Andrian, Berit Antonson, Annabelle Lawrence, Alison James, Peter Knott, Alison Mayer, Jessica Berry, Valerie Fennick, Lizzie Glitherow West, and Julie Williams. We've got more interviews planned. I know there are a few of you in this audience that I'm really hoping to speak to soon, so you'll probably hear from me in the coming weeks. We've heard inspiring stories from women who've led projects, pioneered techniques, and fought for the protection of our underwater heritage. So these are the kinds of stories I think could really encourage more young women to get involved in protected wrecks. It's not always been easy, though. Many of those interviewed have said they often had to work harder than their male counterparts to prove themselves, and we have heard many stories of sexism, which was often at the time just accepted as the norm. As well as looking at women and protected wrecks today, we're also looking at stories of women on board these ships when they were lost. Obviously, historically, the issue of the naval sphere being male-dominated is a clear fact. And of course, this means many investigations and stories told from shipwrecks are often male-focused. However, women were not absent from ships. The role of women not only on board, but also as key parts of the supporting network that enabled maritime trade, transport and industry shouldn't be overlooked. So more of these stories should be told. So we've got volunteers investigating the story of Catherine Trelawny. She was on board HMS Assurance when it sunk off the Isle of Wight in 1753. We're also trying to find out more about any of the women who were on board the London when it exploded in the Thames in 1665. So out of the 24 survivors, there was one woman, so it'd be great to find out more about her. We're also looking at stories of women on board some of the scheduled wrecks. So there's a stewardess who was on board the Seagull, which sunk after a collision in 1868. And there were many women on board the Josephine Willis, emigrating to New Zealand when the ship foundered in 1856. Again, we know there was one female survivor, Catherine May. So what was her story? How did she survive? What happened to her? The image on the right here relates to artefacts which may represent women who were on board HMS Pomone. I just think we do need to be careful. One item that was listed was a thimble, but we can't assume that's associated with a specific gender. So if anyone can help with further stories of women associated with protected or scheduled wrecks, then I'd love to hear from you. So do get in touch. So the project's not yet finished, but some of the conclusions we're drawing are that, we need to create more opportunities for women in diving. This can include practical considerations such as equipment specifically designed for women, the logistics, the timing, frequency of dive trips, and on a personal level, it can also relate to confidence, making it important to provide a supportive community and celebrate women in diving and protected wreck imagery. So representation is really important. We need to aim to have more women represented and increase visibility of female role models. The barriers are often subtle. They're much broader than just maritime archaeology, but it's about changing mindsets and challenging stereotypes and ensuring opportunities. So changes in school, university, household and workplace ecosystems is all crucial to both attract and retain women, particularly in terms of diving. So that's the protected Women in Protected Wrecks project. I wanted to touch on the related project we've been working on with the Honor Frost Foundation called Listening to Our Past, Recording the History of Maritime Archaeology. So both this and the Women and Protected Wrecks project provide fascinating insights into the development of maritime archaeology and the role of many female pioneers. This was also partly developed as a result of the Soundings project, which recorded people's experiences of working with Honor Frost. It was really nice to see Honor and Joan de Platte-Taylor mentioned in Dave's talk just now, so thank you, Dave. Here's a clip actually of Honor Frost discussing how she got into maritime archaeology after realising that the same techniques could be applied on land to underwater sites. I'm hoping this sound's going to work. You can't hear it. Give me a thumbs down or something.
We can't hear it, Lauren, I'm afraid.
No? Okay. Hang on, do you remember what we did last time, Mark? Did we do something on my... Hang on. We did something when I was sharing my screen before, didn't we? 1 minute. We did a practice yesterday, I promise.
Yeah, I can't see what I can change in your settings.
No, I think I just... Oh, no, it's here. Hang on. Share sound. Okay, that's what I pressed yesterday. Okay, I'm hoping this will work this time. See if I can just rewind that. Okay, let's see if this works.
Where did you learn the proper skills of archaeology? On land, I take it, because that's where people were sharpening their skills.
Well, I'm not a professional archaeologist. I'm not an archaeologist. I didn't learn in any formal way. But having, with my Middle Eastern childhood, I got the opportunity shortly after I learned to dive in France to do the drawing, the technical drawing for Dame Catherine Kenyon when she was on her last season of excavation at Jericho. And I was given the tombs, which were away from the old town she was digging.
Which you enjoyed?
I enjoyed them thoroughly because they were really the same sort of problem as a wreck. And then I learned how she wanted these things planned. And it then came to me very forcibly that this is how wrecks should be excavated.
So, yeah, I mean, Dave mentioned about her contributions at Cape Gelidonia, particularly with Joan de Platte-Taylor. She went on to excavate the Punic ship off Sicily in the 70s, the Pharos Lighthouse in Alexandria. She surveyed numerous ports and harbours off Lebanon and Syria, and she really pioneered the study of anchors. And she was also particularly instrumental in the formation of the IJNA. So the Listening to Our Past project is focused on interviews with individuals who've contributed to the field of maritime archaeology with the aim of building a historically informed understanding of the development of maritime archaeology as a discipline, as a practice and as a profession. So looking at how and why maritime archaeology is the way it is today. The project's also identifying personal archives that are at risk of being lost. We're adding these to the Maritime Archaeology Special Collection at the University of Southampton Library, building both a physical archive as well as finding a home for the interviews. So the project is focusing on that period of rapid transformation from the 50s to the 80s, as we still have an opportunity to capture that information from some of the individuals who were involved. Whilst, like we said, previous narratives on the development of the discipline have focused on the likes of George Bass and many male pioneers, the project's shown that whilst obviously their contributions are undoubted, it was a much more complex story involving a real range of people, particularly from non-academic or non-archaeological backgrounds. And it was, in fact, thanks to several women that we are where we are today. So these pictures are of Lena Swinney and Susan Katsev. Both of them played a pivotal role in the pioneering excavation of the Kyrenia ship, which was excavated off Cyprus in the late 1960s. And today, thanks to their ongoing efforts, the work's now being fully published. I had the opportunity to interview them both and find out more about what maritime archaeology was like in the late 1960s and how they've contributed to its development. So it was really fascinating to hear about their experiences of diving and the archaeological techniques they used, many of which we still use today. Another interesting insight has been into the development of policy, so the protection of underwater heritage and the relationships between archaeologists and treasure hunters. It's been a particularly complex story here, obviously, in the UK, something we don't have time to delve into today. We've spoken at length with people like Peter Marsden, Bob York, Valerie Fennick and David Blackman, who were either involved in the protection of Rex Act in some way, or as well as the development of things like the NAS. Again, their backgrounds are varied and not all are archaeologists by training, but all share a passion for protecting not only underwater heritage, but also intertidal and coastal sites, as well as pushing for training and raising awareness of maritime heritage. We've undertaken some interviews with people working in other countries. I recently spoke to Jeremy Green and he provided fascinating insights into maritime archaeology in Australia, for example, but there are still many more people that we want to hear from. What this project's shown is that maritime archaeology, it is a relatively young discipline, but it has a complex history, and the fairly sort of singular narratives you find published, they're not telling the whole picture and they're not recognising the huge variety of people involved. We've just been awarded funding for a second phase of listening to our past. We're planning to continue with interviews, particularly in other countries. We're also planning to develop an online portal, so like an open access portal, to make all this material available. So we've been gathering all the interviews. We've also been gathering photographs as well, and there's transcripts of the interviews. So that will all hopefully be available online, along with interviews from other projects. So the Soundings projects I mentioned earlier, or the interviews with people who'd worked with Honor Frost, that obviously touches on the development of the discipline as well. Other historical interviews, like the one Honor gave in 1993 that we heard the snippet from earlier, that was from the BBC archives. So we hope that we can include, other historical interviews that have already been undertaken as well. And then the idea is that the portal will provide a really fascinating and a valuable research resource, also allowing other organisations to upload their interviews. I know that INA are planning to interview some of their founding members in America, so hopefully we can add those. I've also got an interview from George Bass that someone in the Honor Frost Foundation undertook several years ago. So I'm just working on permission to include that as well, because it's brilliant. I just want to say a really big thank you to those of you who've already been interviewed, because I know a few of you might be in the audience, and we really value your time and your stories. I've got a few short clips from Peter Marsden, Veronica Robbins and Jane Maddox, just highlighting, some of the things we're learning about the development of maritime archaeology and their experiences. I'd love to play more to you, but hopefully you'll be able to hear them all on the online portal when we've developed that. With Veronica and Jane, they were both interviewed for both projects, the Women in Protected Wrecks project and the Listening to Our Past project. So they're very, very closely related. So I'm just going to play this again. Hopefully the sound will work.
Somehow I had to make it work. And it seemed to me that if we were going to be looking at seriously at our heritage, and we are a maritime nation, aren't we? Mm. Historically we are, but with that comes the smugglers. That side of it as well. But we had a lot to be proud of and a lot to protect. And the Protection of Wrecks Act wasn't there for nothing. It was there because it was recognised in 1973 that there were wrecks that needed to be protected. But there was lots of other material out there that perhaps wasn't of intrinsic value, but was important. And I started to become fascinated by it all. And I realised I was custodian. I felt I was custodian of our maritime heritage almost, because I somehow had to get this whole thing to work.
And then I was diving wrecks, and then came the Mary Rose. And
Right, so that was your first maritime.
that was my first
project.
maritime, and I can still today remember that first dive, because when you leapt off the platform, you went down the shot line. Right by the shot line, there was one of the guns, and it was barrel into the mud, so classical lens sticking out. And people obviously touched it as they went past. So it was a bronze gun, so it glowed. So it wasn't very good fizz, but it was this glowing gun, and everybody sort of patted it as you went past. And I can still remember the first time I patted it, and then went off to have a cook's tour around the wreck. And as I patted it and left the shot, I absolutely knew that things had changed, and it was never quite going to be the same again.
I was age 14 in 1954. I visited an excavation in London of the Temple of Mithras, and my grandfather, who's a quantity surveyor, he managed to get me permission to dig on the building site near the temple. And I found all sorts of Roman remains and got hooked on archaeology in London. And then in 1959, I was visiting Guy's Hospital, where they were building a new wing called New Guy's House. And there in the side of the a huge hole was part of a Roman boat. And I had no idea what to do about it or who to get in touch with or anything. So I recorded what I could see, and I then undertook in 1959, that was in 1958. I've got the date of the actual discovery of when the boat, 8th of March 1958. That's when I got involved in maritime archaeology, though I didn't know it at the time. The next year I did a small excavation and found one end of the boat. It's a 2nd century New Guy's houseboat, and I applied for it to be scheduled as a historic monument, and I was told that no, by the government department dealing with scheduling of monuments at the time, that because the boat was intended to move, it had no legal status. It couldn't be protected under the scheduling law. I thought this was all wrong because this was huge, and did it mean that HMS Victory could not be protected as a historic ship, for example?
So that's just a tiny snippet of some of the great stories we've had the privilege to hear. So, just by talking to these people, we're finding out so much more, like with Veronica, about the development of her role at the receiver of wreck. Later, she talked to me about the amnesty that was held in 2000, and Jane's experience of working on so many maritime archaeological sites, and Peter's, obviously, his role in the Protection of Wrecks Act. So it was really great to hear these stories, and I hope we can make them available for you all to hear as well. If you'd like to be interviewed then, or discuss personal archive material with us, or if you want to nominate other people who you think we should interview, then please do get in touch. You can also apply for funding to explore the archives in the Maritime Archaeology Special Collections. So basically this stemmed from Honor Frost's archive was there to begin with, and since then we've added Sean McGrail's, Lucian Bash, Nick Fleming's, and Peter Marsden and John Bingham's archives are in the process of being added at the moment as well. So it's a really fascinating collection, and we're encouraging people to go and explore those. So have a look on the Honor Frost Foundation websites for the Archive Fellowship. And you can see if you can go and explore them. I mean, you can go and explore them anyway as well if you want to. Honor Frost is just fascinating. There's so much research potential in all these archives. So that's it from me. Hopefully that's in time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lauren. I like the anchorology there at the bottom of that
Yes.
slide.
Yeah, we chose that. I know. I think Honor came up with that word. So we have chosen some projects that we would prioritise for funding that look at those sorts of things in the archive. So I'm sure a few of you would be interested in looking at the anchors. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Okay, no problem. We've got 3 minutes or so. If anyone has got any questions relating to either of those two initiatives to Lauren, could you elaborate on the outputs, the outputs of the HE Women in Protected Wrecks project? What and when?
Yeah, okay. So, oh God, when? I can't remember off the top of my head. Early next year. So there will be a report for Historic England with our recommendations. The interviews, if we've had permission from those that we interviewed, we will be sharing those through the online portal for people to listen to. But again, that depends on the permissions from the people that we spoke to. And then the women and maritime, the stories of women in the past, will be including blog posts on the MAT website as well about those particular stories. So there's a range of outputs, hopefully early part of next year, I think.
I picked up on one of the comments that were made, the quotations that you provided from some of the people that you've spoken to about it being a wider diving sector issue, and that actually, particularly if you're looking at licensees of designated wreck sites, other than maybe the Anne or the Amsterdam, it's going to be underwater, and therefore the ability to dive. And it reminds me of the Margaret Rule, learning to dive in order to actually touch and see with our own eyes. Have you come across something called Girls at Scuba?
Yes. Yeah. They've been. I've actually also through my Honor Frost role. So they featured a blog about Honor Frost on their website, and they shared things like the Dive and Dig podcast for us, and they've been brilliant. But they are more international, but I think that's a great platform, and they've got a lot of followers on Instagram, which is good to see as well.
So there's no such sort of female women only club in the UK that you know of? Because yes,
not that I know of.
Canada, USA, Australia seems to.
And I'm not sure that's particularly when you look at the BZAC website where they talked about how to engage more women and what the barriers are. That the answer is a diverse club and having men and women, but making it an environment that women want to be part of as well. So I think just with diversity, you bring more opportunities. You can learn from each other, and everyone has got so many ideas to bring. So,
is there any sort of diversity network in archaeology? And does CIFA have such a thing?
They probably do, I think. No, I don't know off the top of my head though. I have come across, Historic England have guidelines for diversity and inclusion, obviously, as part of their organisation, but not as a specific network, I don't think.
No, I know from personal experience, from friends, families, etc., that there are other industries, other sectors have networks that are open to all to attend. It's not that it's female only attendance, but
I think Alison's just shared a link. There is one, CIFA diversity subgroup of the board. And several thank you,
Rob from
Rob.
Rob from CIFA.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Okay, someone's day's written very interesting, Lauren, on the material and the oral archives you're building up at Southampton at the university. And Julie's confirmed end of January for the Women in Protected Wrecks. Okay, it's good to have these people to help with it. I love it. Okay, so brilliant. That's 11 o'clock. Thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us for that session.